How are you, viewers and listeners? Thanks for tuning in. It's the third show, the Cowboys Take, Reid Lance Rosenthal. And I'm going to ask for some opinions on this show. And I'm going to do this is kind of Reid's musings, if you will. We're not going to have an interview today. I'm working on some great guests, and we're going to have a really terrific lineup going forward. But I thought we should maybe step back just a little bit because I want your input. We have a very successful radio show around the country, and on the Right Side Radio, you can read all about it on the rightsideradio.com. All sorts of articles, tremendous, a wealth of information on all sorts of topics which affect you in your everyday lives and going forward and planning and, shall we say, deciphering the psyops that's thrown at you and plugging it back against reality and truth. And I have a limited amount of time. I'm a rancher, I'm an author, I'm late on the next two books, and I really got to get them out. The ranch is 24/7, as you can well imagine. And I have other things going on also, family, just like everybody else. So, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring to you a visual image with some additional information over and above the radio show. And on the radio show, I'm trying to bring you information which really, it can be covered here in the video, but not as well because the radio is very time sensitive. It's only an hour show. I have to pack a lot of stuff in it. And the way radio works is there's what's called a clock in radio, and every station has their own clock, although many are similar. And you have about 14 and a half minutes, I'm rounding numbers, in your three segments, which comprise an hour show. And then there's 5 minutes where they have to do the station ID, and there's advertisements and all that kind of stuff in between the segments. So it's very regulated, it's very regimented. You only have so much time within it. Now, on this video format, there's no such pressure. I can kind of go as long as I want, but let's face it, everybody has, other things to do, and everybody has a limited attention time span. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and I really, really, really would like you to give me your thoughts in the comments below, or you can email me direct, okay, on the right side radio at Reagan.com. That's on the right side radio at Reagan.com, Reagan, just like the president, at Reagan.com. So whatever works, whatever floats your boat, so to speak. But I am looking for input because we have several things we can do here. I can, as I have for the last several weeks, kind of incorporate the interviews on the video. I just don't have time really for interviews on the radio except like short snippets. I can integrate parts of the interviews on the radio, segments, excerpts, etc., that make the point of that particular radio show, and combine them that way. I can take some of the rat-a-tat-tat, which is kind of my boom, 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 current events situation, which basically I don't even get to cover a fraction of what I'd like to cover on the radio show, and I can put that into the video. I can do a combination of the two. The video could also stand on its own. Virtually no tether at all to the radio show, and vice versa. I know that some of you are radio listeners and some of you are video listeners, and some of you do both. So I'd really like your opinions on this. Would you like to see some of the radio show incorporated in the video, some of the video incorporated in the radio show, as I kind of did the last 2 weeks, or both of them kind of stand completely alone? Knowing that the foundation of the video, and once in a while you'll just have me pontificating on my lonely, shall we say, is going to be interviews. The last 2 weeks we have great interviews, one with John Rubino, which was terrific, and one with Phil Streibel from Blue Line Futures, which I think really opened people's eyes to a shadowy but really critically important part of the economy, which is the futures market and how it affects you and how it forecasts the future. And upcoming, we're going to have interviews with people in realty. We're going to have interviews with people who are fighting the good fight, and this is one of my pet things, on private property. What the government is doing to take away your private property. And we're going to be focusing on the real estate part and the ranch part and the farm part. For instance, did you ever hear about the NAC? Well, did you know that conservation easements, which by the way, I'm extremely familiar with and have been involved in for 35, 40 years. Did you know that conservation easements are now being used by the government to get their slimy little land grabbing fingers into your land pie? There's things you can do to protect it. Conservation easements can be really good things. They can have tremendous financial benefits and tax benefits, but I'm not going to go into the details right now. But the NAC is really where Wall Street and folks like BlackRock are friends, folks. They, all they do is think about us and what can we do to help the common man today. Uh, when Klaus Schwab says you will own nothing and you will be happy, you will own nothing and you will be happy. He means it. This is their plan. You will own nothing, you will be the serf, you will rent and purchase everything from them. And this NAC thing is really insidious. I mean, I brought you a 4-part series on the radio show. For those of you who are just getting acquainted with me, just tuning into the video, haven't been on the radio, there's a great archive. You can listen to the radio show on podcast all you want, anytime you want, in any kind of combination you want. But about 6, 8 weeks ago, I did a show, or actually 4 shows, on the attack on private property, what they're doing to steal your private property, and it is theft. They can't do it overtly because we're kind of protected by the Constitution, and they don't quite have the control they need in the courts to, shall we say, have you relinquish what you own for the common good, as Karl Marx would say. But they can do it through all sorts of insidious ways. Like Obama and Holder's choke point, working against the Second Amendment or against coin dealers or against anybody which is outside the control and the mainstream of government woke thought. And basically what this is they're forming companies that will monetize the resources from your land, your air, your water, your crops, your livestock, your oil and gas holdings, your mineral rights. I can go on down the list, and I'm going to in the future because we're going to have some phenomenal guests on here describing this in detail for you. This is stuff you need to know because it affects all of us. It particularly affects us if we own any quote unquote land. And I don't mean tens of thousands of acres like ranchers like myself and whatever. I'm talking about you, your half an acre, your quarter of an acre, your city lot, your acre and a half or your 5-acre rural property. This affects all of us. And in the private property series I did, which I really, it's a be great foundation for what I got coming for you on this video. I go over all the ways they are compressing an inverted pyramid, right? Here's the top base. It goes down like this. The top base, folks, are all the resources of the country. It's all the land in the United States and the protectorates and the islands and you name it. And once they get control of that top level, all the water, all the air, all the timber, all the minerals, you name it, they go down to the next level and they compress their control of that. And then all the way down to the next level. And then down at the point of the pyramid, that's your front door. And don't think they won't be knocking on it and asking you for the keys if you don't listen to me and others who are trying to ring the alarm, because that's their plan and they're going to do it if we let them. It's up to us, not up to anybody else. Nobody else is going to stop these guys. All right. So I digressed a little bit because this is a passionate subject for me, but give me your feedback on how you would like this video to integrate with the radio show and vice versa. Okay. By the way, if you want to hear that private property series that I did on the radio show, on the rightsideradio.com, great search bar, lower left on the home page, just type in private property. All 4 shows will pop right up. Listen at your leisure. That would be terrific. By the way, anybody listening to this, even though this is a kind of, should we say, just a Reid rant today, please like it, subscribe to it. The more subscribers we have, the better able I am to bring you really great guests. I mean, our first 2 guests were terrific. This is the infancy. We're embryonic tissue on this video channel, readily admitted. They were great to come on with really, like no audience. I mean, we're just starting here. One of the things I want to tell you is that I don't do this for money. Trust me, I'm past the point where I have to do anything I don't want to do. And this is not about monetizing this channel. We're on Rumble, we're on BitChute, we're on Tradeon, we're on YouTube until YouTube kicks us off, as I'm sure they will, which is why we're on the other channels. This is not about money. I'm not monetizing this at all. Yes, it'd be great to have the costs covered because it's expensive, but this is really for love of country and love of my fellow Americans. And I don't mean the woke progressives who really need to move to Afghanistan or Iran or Russia or China, since they have such great systems over there and ours is so bad. Go out and, shall we say, practice what you preach. Put your feet, put your wallet, put your butt where your mouth is. You people are just unbelievable. But that's also a topic for another time. Anyway, the more subscribers we have, the more likes we have, the better we will do in terms of getting really great guests that can really explain things in detail, not just from my mouth. I mean, a lot of this stuff I can explain to you, but it's not the same as hearing a noted expert in a particular focused field talk about things. And, the interplay between them and myself, I think, can ferret out points which you may be wondering about, you may want to know, or that clarify fuzzy edges of some of these things. For instance, this NAC thing, right? Where people want to monetize the assets of your property. And then, of course, raise your taxes, raise your insurance, make it, take your resources, prohibit you from making money from your own resources because they're making the money from the resources, and eventually take your land. And listen, I'm making this simplified, but that's exactly what's going on. Remember that inverted pyramid, the National Parks, Forest Service, BLM up here, and then the state stuff here, and then the private lands here, all the way down. Okay, this is a very, very clever, very diabolical plan. One thing you have to give the enemy, the progressive left, the totalitarian fascists, the crony capitalists, is that they are smart and they play long ball and they're not bashful and they don't care about you. They don't care about you at all, not even in the least. One of the things I want to do, or many of the things I want to do with this video, is bring to you truth and reality, which will counteract the psyops that these folks are throwing at you every second of every day from every direction you can imagine, right? Mainstream media, I mean, they've kind of lost their credibility, but believe it or not, there's still people who watch them and listen to them. and all the other sources, right? And it's going to get worse with AI because they're going to be able to do really tricky things, and you're just not going to be able to tell the difference if it's real, not real, made up, not made up, a real person, not a real person. For that matter, I mean, they could have me on saying, we should all give our property to the government tomorrow because it's for the common good. I mean, AI is going to get to that point. You're going to have to be able to ferret out what is truth and what is not truth. And let me give you an example. Let me give you some examples. We'll kind of combine here with my asking you for your opinion and what you're thinking. Um, Let me give you a few things that will make you think. So think about all the things that the government has told you and the experts, the experts have told you that were going to happen, that were inevitable, that were inescapable, that are going to get you, going to get us all, unless we do X, Y, and Z. And we do it right away. Wear your mask, get your jab, stop using your car, don't use that fuel, stop that fertilizer, and on and on and on. I mean, the list is endless, right? Don't use your gas stove because we're going to outlaw them. I mean, whatever. Okay, so Glacier Park. Do you remember the stories about Glacier Park? Oh, I don't know, a couple years ago. All the glaciers in Glacier Park, folks, were all going to be gone. Glacier National Park in Montana. They were all going to be gone by 2020. If you go to the websites now, just in the last year, all the stories are gone. You know why? Because the glaciers are still there. Oh, well, imagine that. And then we have the current stories about Old Faithful. Old Faithful in Yellowstone, the big geyser, kind of one of the hallmarks of Yellowstone Park. Well, that's not going to be around anymore, folks, because, this climate change and the drought and the lack of water. And how is a geyser going to erupt if it doesn't have any water? I mean, put aside that this kind of flies in the face of the geothermal foundations of geysers and where the water really comes from. Never mind the science, because they don't care about science. Science is just a catchword to them. So there's a story, and you'll see that disappear in a few years when Old Faithful continues to erupt. Did you know? One of the latest things now, you're going to love this. This is no kidding. And by the way, on the rightsideradio.com, we're going to post all the articles. I post all the articles, not I, the producers. I don't do squat because I'm not capable, technically, of doing squat. All the articles we talked about, videos, you name it, are always posted on that radio site to back up what I bring to my radio listeners. We're going to be doing that with this also. There'll be articles and such from this video, other videos of other people talking, not just, this isn't about me, right? This is about us. This is about the United States of America. This is about the Constitution and freedom. But all those will be posted on the rightsideradio.com. And eventually my backdrop here, Charlie, my buddy, my backdrop here will change. We'll be able to put up graphs and all sorts of things. I mean, this is just fledgling right now. But for right now, we're going to have all the articles that I reference on the video that perhaps were not referenced in the radio show on the radio website. You can click right on them. You can read them. There'll be links, everything backed up. I mean, I was trained as a journalist. I have to have at least one source. I really would rather have two or more to verify a fact. And I will tell you when it's facts, and I will tell you when it's my opinion. I think you'll be able to tell when it's my opinion, to be honest with you. I don't think that's too, it's not like I have a complete poker face here when I'm talking about some of these subjects. In any event, so did you know that the latest thing by the Greenies, by the progressive left, in their attempts to control you and scare you, because fear is the biggest motivator, and this is true, of all human emotions, is that we're all going to incinerate unless we reduce our toilet paper usage to 1 square at a time, folks. That's it, 1 square. Not 2 squares, not 5 squares, not a length of toilet paper. Oh, and by the way, it's supposed to be recycled. Now, never mind that in reality, recycled toilet paper takes way more energy and is far more harmful to the environment than normally made, normally manufactured toilet paper. It doesn't matter. Recycled toilet paper, 1 sheet. Just think about that. You'd be using more than 1 sheet of toilet paper. I mean, it doesn't matter if after a week or two nobody will come near you or talk to you. 1 sheet. This is good for the planet, and what's good for the planet is good for the masses, and what's good for the masses is good for you. Yes, you betcha. Did you know way back in the early 1900s, the New York Times, some things never change, right? All the news that's fit to print. The New York Times ran articles saying that the car, this is when right after Henry Ford first came out with the Model T, Model A, whatever it was, that the car will never take off. Horses are going to be forever. And you know why? Because the human brain, folks, can only move at the speed which is equivalent to 1/8 of a mile in a second. Let me think about this. Oh, and therefore cars weren't going to work because cars would go faster than 1/8 of a mile in a second. And the human brain is not capable of moving at that kind of speed. And, bad things were going to happen. I'm really not making this up. You can go back and Google it. It's unbelievable. Oh, and then we had the summer of 23, right? 20, excuse me. Summer of 23. Yes, last summer. Did you remember all the articles? This is the hottest summer, the worst summer, the driest summer, the warmest summer ever, 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 ever. And this is why we're all going to incinerate in 9 years. Guess what? If you go to NOAA, right? National Atmospheric, blah, blah, blah. Just go to NOAA. This is the government. This is, not some right wing kooks coming up with numbers. Well, it just so happens that the summer of 23 was normal. It was average. There were some places with higher temperatures and some places with lower temperatures, but the bottom line is the summer of 23 was normal. That didn't stop the psyops folks from telling you that it was the hottest, driest, warmest, most significantly anti-human, anti-global summer in history. I mean, these are just some examples. And then, of course, we have the hypocrisy out there, which goes a long way in telling you when they're lying to you, which is pretty much when their lips are moving. So we have Zuckerberg. I'm no fan of Zuckerberg. He looks like Data, doesn't he? Like Data on Star Trek. I mean, he really does. Zuckerberg is one of that clan of elitists, which is telling us meat has to go away, right? Cattle need to go away. Methane farts, all that methane gas from cattle farts is ruining the planet, and meat needs to go away, and blah, 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 blah. And Bill Gates is out there doing synthetic meat, etc. Did you know that Mark Zuckerberg has cattle? Oh, yeah. Yeah, he does. Has a little cattle ranch, the whole 9 yards. And do you know, because he can afford it, he feeds them macadamia nuts. I'm not making this up. So that their meat will taste better. So, how's that for some hypocrisy for you? And then, of course, we have Obama, Kerry, and a host of others. I mean, the list is too long, telling us that um, everything's going to be underwater. The East Coast is going to be underwater. Florida is going to be underwater. California is going to be underwater to the extent it doesn't fall off from the coming eruption and earthquakes and all that kind of good stuff that's coming to California. And all these things, I mean, they're talking about 20, 30-foot rises in the level of the sea because, the polar ice is melting and a host of other factors that they make up. Except Obama has a 35, 40, $45 million estate on Martha's Vineyard, an island in the Atlantic. I think the highest point of Martha's Vineyard, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, it's right out there for you to check, is like 35 or 40 or 50 feet, like maybe above sea level. And I think that his house, multi-million dollar mansion, is only about 10 to 12 feet above sea level. What's wrong with this picture? What's not tabulating here and what they're telling us? John Kerry, yeah, $22 million mansion, 4 feet above sea level. But folks, we're all going to be underwater. They must have really good flood insurance, don't you think? I mean, like really good flood insurance. Yeah. And maybe some canoes parked downstream that they can just jump in, do their Hiawatha as they escape the climate change tsunami. Mm-hmm. You betcha. And then, of course, we've heard all about how EVs and all that kind of good stuff is going to save the world, save the planet. No more fuel, no more fossil fuels, blah, 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 blah. Well, it seems that the Biden administration just slapped 100%, that's 100% tariffs on China, on EVs and other associated things from China. Now, you would think if China was manufacturing EVs and China was number one on the planet in terms of doing this wonderfully green thing, going to save the planet because last time I checked, we're all on the same planet. There wouldn't be tariffs, would there? I mean, we might want to compete with them, economics, jobs, et cetera, but you would cripple all this good stuff that's going to save the planet just for what? Your buddies who are in the solar industry here in the United States, or the American car manufacturers that you've mandated need to build EVs. I think Ford lost $4.5 billion in the last year trying to put out EVs, and now they're kind of backing away from it, like all the other car manufacturers. And of course, then we have the electric thing, right? Everything's going to go electric, folks. Now, listen, the grid cannot support what we have now. It can't support what we have now plus the increase in usage, which right now is 1.5%, going to 6 to 7%. Those are experts. I'm no electrician or electrical wizard. You're going to have all those things going up, and that's going to increase electric consumption by 6 to 6.5%. And then you have crypto mining, which is another like 0.5%, 1%. I mean, this is big numbers when you total it all up. And then you have EV car charging stations. California is mandating EV cars, but they don't have the power to charge the stations, right? Okay. Think about all this stuff. Think about how absolutely nonsensical it is when you take the nonsense they spew, which they expect, what an insult, you to be stupid enough to believe, and you compare that to reality. I mean, like, please, give me a break. So, one of the things I want to do with this channel, and I want to make this kind of brief today, but one of the things I want to do with this channel is to expose this psyops. I just gave you a few of them, trust me. And I want to tell you about the economy. Right now, it's all politics, it's all nonsense. They're trying to tell you the economy's great. The economy, folks, pretty much sucks. Okay. I mean, you have the consumer is pretty much done. Inflation is not 3.7%. The unemployment rate is not 4%. The participation rate is not 62%. I can go all down the list. None of it is true. In fact, you can ferret, you can go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you can go to other government sites, you can look for yourself. You can go to shadowstatistics.com, which is a tremendous site to give you actual, before they started messing with how they manipulate and put together the numbers, unemployment, employment, money supply, inflation, you name it. So I'm going to be bringing you that reality because you need to have reality to make decisions. I'm not going to tell you how to think. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't think my guests will tell you how to think or what to do. We're going to bring you facts, and we trust you. You're smart enough to know what needs to be done and when and how it best suits your personal situation because, folks, everybody's personal situation is their situation. And we're going to be talking about preparedness, right? There's some great link sites. I mean, like pages and pages of information on the On the Right Side Radio.com site. Upper right-hand corner homepage, there's a COVID page. Unbelievable resource of information. For years we've been putting it together. One of the best on the web. There's a COVID litigation page. Okay. By the way, there's all sorts of litigation flying on that, particularly where companies and the government illegally, and that's been ruled on, forced people, either fired people, wrongful termination for refusing to get the jab, or people got the jab and it's not worked out very well for the folks who got it. And this is something that you need to do as Americans. You need to stand up. You need to make people accountable. And you need to take whatever actions you need to take to make things right. He who does not stand for principles has none. Think about that. There's nobody behind us, folks. I mean, we're it. We're the last line of defense here, basically for the planet, never mind for American representative republic and freedom. We're going to be talking about international. For instance, I mean, the mainstream media is not bringing you anything. You basically have to go to foreign outlets to get any international information. And listen, because of the hotbeds around the world, this is key information for you. I mean, thinking about your family's safety, about your preparedness in any way, shape, or form, physical, financial, you name it. You have to have this information. Did you know that in the last 2 or 3 days, Ukraine, using British and American weapons, has taken out one of them 1,500 kilometers inside of Russia? The distant early warning systems, or 2 of them that Russia has. I mean, this is really part of their nuclear triad, their nuclear defense, kind of like our DEW system, distant early warning system, to let Russia know when there's incoming nukes, when there's been a launch anywhere around the globe. I mean, we have it, China has it, all the players have it. And here we are taking out those installations, or shall we say, having Ukraine. Right. The Ukrainians are doing this, folks. Don't you worry. The Americans and NATO aren't doing anything. They're just innocent. They're just watching all this, wringing their hands, those Ukrainians. We can't control them. Anyway, you need to know about stuff like that. Okay, I brought up on the radio show last week, Russia has now kind of, should we say, unlimited its tactical nuclear weapons arsenal. And it's actually locked and loaded on planes and other delivery systems along NATO borders, like around Poland, way into Ukraine. This is really big stuff. I mean, this can kind of affect you, don't you think? Over in Taiwan, China they're that far away from a full blockade of Taiwan. Nobody's talking about it, of course. And they're putting together a flotilla of ferries, right? Amphibious landing, troops. And their goal is 6,000 amphibious barges, ferries, whatever, to get troops across the strait to Taiwan. Uh, my personal opinion is I don't think China will invade Taiwan. This is my opinion, because I think that they can eventually get Taiwan without firing a shot. And the Chinese are patient. They've been around thousands of years, unlike us. But nonetheless, there's a lot of saber rattling going on over there. And then you have all sorts of nastiness happening in Europe, in Bosnia and Serbia, which nobody's talking about. And in Africa, did you know there's been 6 coups? 6. I think we're going on our 7th as I'm talking, of governments getting overthrown in Africa just over the last 3 to 6 months. 6 coups. It's unbelievable, right? I mean, that is not a very stable continent. The French are being kicked out. The Americans are being kicked out. The Russians are coming in. There was a confrontation between American and Russian forces at a base, I believe it was in the Congo, that the Americans were supposed to vacate, the Russians were supposed to take over, and the Americans didn't vacate. The Americans being us, of course. There's all sorts of things going on that I'm going to try and bring to your attention. And there's all sorts of things going on in the Mideast, too, which is its own, unfortunately, uh, so far unsolvable powder keg. All of these things affect you. And we're going to be talking about corruption and treason, because we have corruption throughout our governments. But a lot of that corruption has really moved to the level of treason. In fact, on my radio show this week, I began a little series, not going to be a big one, with the history and the definition of treason over the last several thousand years. You might find that really interesting on the rightsideradio.com. But a lot of what's going on, and it all comes back to people not being held accountable, which is why when you have a chance to hold any of these people accountable, you need to do so. Did you know that there's a huge Japanese study, millions of participants, that just got done on the COVID vaccine? And basically, the study found that you really don't want to have a blood transfusion or get blood from somebody who's been vaxxed. And this study, which by the way is already in preprint, in other words, it's not yet in one of the scientific journals, it's getting ready to come out in the scientific journals, preprint. This study is up on the website under the COVID page, along with several others that have come out in the last few weeks. And there's things you can do, by the way, if unfortunately you succumb to the psyops or you were pressured illegally into taking medications you didn't want to take. There's some things you can do which seem to be helping people with that stuff, also on the COVID page. And there's lots of other sources out there too. The Wellness Company, Dr. Dr. McCullough, one gentleman over in Europe who is phenomenal. I'm trying to have him on the show here. So we have lots to cover on this video show over and above the radio show. Let me know how you want the two to kind of intermix, knowing that I unfortunately don't really have time to do a complete video show that's completely separate from the radio show every week. I just don't have the time. The radio show itself is really a day. I mean, if I boil it all down, it's like 24 hours of research, doing the show itself, etc. This video show is a little bit easier, particularly with the interviews, because I know who I'm interviewing. I know what questions I'm going to ask, and the interview is going to be 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it's going to be. So your input would be extremely valuable and welcome, and don't be bashful. On the right side radio at Reagan.com if you want to send an email, or you can leave the information right here on the comment section below my smiling maw on whatever platform you happen to be listening to me on. So the last thing I want to say, and perhaps it should have been the first, is I want to wish America, all our veterans, both alive and past, a really happy Memorial Day. I want to say thanks to all those veterans, going all the way back to Concord and Lexington, the 8 Americans who died in that first battle, April 19th, 1775, at the Bridge at Concord and the Greens at Lexington, including, by the way, the very first black man to ever die in battle for the United States. I want to thank all those veterans, all their families, for sacrificing all, and in some cases, not giving their lives, but giving really their lives in terms of long-term permanent disabilities, wounds, disfigurement, dismemberment. You people are all heroes, every single one of you. And I also want to say thank you to the veterans who are alive, who carried the torch of this representative republic, the ideals it stands for, and the Constitution. As I talk about in the radio show this week, every other country on the planet, no exceptions, you pledge allegiance to the government or to the monarch or to the office. Only in the United States of America do you pledge allegiance to the Constitution. No entity, no person, just the ideal, the concept. And it's that Constitution that all these veterans who didn't make it gave their lives for. And all the veterans who made it but with permanent disabilities gave up part of their physical freedom for. And it's the reason and the motive for all the people that are serving in the armed forces right now, men, women, whatever branch of service they are. And I just want to say thank you from one American to all of you. And on behalf, I hope, of all the Americans everywhere, whether or not listening to me now or in the future. So you have a great Memorial Day weekend. Remember what this is. One last little item for you. We're also kind of struggling with whether we should bring the video shows out. Oh, sorry, Charlie. Whether we should bring the video shows out on Fridays or Mondays. Would love to hear what you have to say. You have a great Memorial Day weekend. We'll yak at you next week with an interview here and, of course, on the Right Side Radio, on the rightsideradio.com, in between with our radio show, which comes out every Friday morning. Thanks so much.